I was Oliver's shadow, and the only girl by his side, until the transfer student appeared. Oliver's family tore us apart, sending him and me abroad. In a foreign land, tensions escalated into intimacy. After sobering up, Oliver remained silent in remorse for a long time before saying he would take responsibility. This relationship lasted until our return home. When Oliver abandoned me yet again for the transfer student, I breathed a sigh of relief. The Oliver family sent me abroad and arranged a job for me. I didn't even know how to bring up breaking up, when I only ever intended to have some fun anyway. Oliver was blessed with striking good looks, broad shoulders, a narrow waist, a firm backside, and impressive assets. When he spoke to me, those eyes of his that could make even a dog feel adored, combined with the way his Adam's apple bobbed, made my heart race uncontrollably. She was simply a divine beauty. I had been coveting her for a long time. I was a poor student sponsored by Oliver's family. After my mother gave birth to my younger brother, she packed me off to the Oliver household to be their child bride. Aunt Carola was kind-hearted and took me in. But I knew my place. I could never be a child bride. At best, I'd be a little nanny. I glanced at Oliver's family's nanny quarters, bigger than my own parents' master bedroom. And so I followed Oliver all the way from elementary school through high school. He skipped class and I covered for him. He slept and I did his homework. I watched Oliver's drawer fill up with love letters. Oliver didn't seem interested in any of the girls. But when someone teased him about me, saying, "Oliver, with all these girlfriends, you're cycling through one to your little child bride, get jealous." What child bride? She asked. Just a chamber made there for Oliver to use during his dry spells. Oliver threw a punch. It was the first time Oliver had ever hit someone. He learned martial arts, striking people with deadly precision in every move. At that moment, I felt like I was someone special to Oliver. I took a bit of pride in that. Until Elizabeth transferred to our school. A beautiful and pure-looking girl was introducing herself on the podium. Nearly all the boys were staring with wide-eyed fascination. Except for Oliver. He was sleeping with his head on the desk, merely lifting his eyelids for a glance before his expression remained unchanged. The teacher assigned Elizabeth a seatmate, a lecherous fat boy who kept ogling her. Elizabeth hugged her school bag and walked toward the empty seat next to Oliver, whispering softly, "Classmate, may I sit here?" Someone gasped sharply. The last person who wanted to sit beside Oliver was a girl who had a crush on him. Oliver sneered at the time and spat out a single word, "Scram." But now, under Elizabeth's fleeting gaze, Oliver's Adam's apple moved as he drawled indifferently, "Suit yourself." Elizabeth let out a sigh of relief and cautiously took a seat. I was sitting right in front of Oliver. The entire day I listened as Elizabeth took the initiative to flirt with Oliver, showing him her notes, sharing snacks with him. Oliver went from initial annoyance and rejection to gradually tolerating her advances. A sudden sense of foreboding crept into my heart. I listened for movement behind me day after day. Even during study sessions, my mind would inevitably wander. Elizabeth said to Oliver, "This chapter is very important, don't you dare fall asleep." I thought Oliver would refuse, but seconds later I heard him say, "If it's so important, then tell me about it." My hand trembled, leaving a deep scratch from the pen tip, ruining a full day's worth of study notes on the paper. When Oliver asked me to buy breakfast for two instead of one, I wasn't particularly surprised. There was only one expected feeling. It was the first time Oliver had confessed his feelings to a girl so solemnly. Someone remarked, "Is all this fuss necessary? What girl could possibly reject Oliver? Oliver just needs to crook his finger, and that transfer student would come running into his arms." Oliver kicked him and said sternly, "She's different." She was indeed different because she rejected Oliver. She said, "Oliver, we're both students, our studies should come first." Oliver's face darkened. But then Elizabeth added, "After the college entrance exams, I'll seriously consider your confession." Oliver's expression instantly brightened. "Good, remember what you said." From then on, Oliver restrained his usual temperament and truly began to focus on his studies. Delayed gratification makes the reward all the more anticipated. Although he and Elizabeth weren't officially together, their relationship was filled with intense ambiguity. He would call her Elizabeth, to which she'd respond with a coquettish glare. He used his allowance to cover all three of Elizabeth's daily meals. When Elizabeth tried to refuse, he'd say it'd go to waste otherwise. He would frequently send Elizabeth various gifts, and she would return the favor by tutoring him. They were practically together, with only that thin layer of window paper left unbroken between them. Listening to the sounds behind me every day, I gradually grew numb. The college entrance exams arrived swiftly. But at that very moment, something happened in Elizabeth's family. Her father somehow found out about her relationship with Oliver, beat her, and then demanded money from Oliver. Oliver answered Elizabeth's call and left just 10 minutes before the exam began. The result was Oliver missed his college entrance exam to protect Elizabeth and even broke his leg in the process. When things escalated to such an extent, I had no choice but to tell Aunt Carolina the whole truth. Oliver was locked away. When I brought him his meal, he lifted the soup bowl and poured it over my head. "Patricia, you didn't actually think you were my child bride, did you? And then you went tattling to my mother. You disgust me." The soup dripped down in droplets. With vegetable leaves clinging to my hair and face, I silently stared at Oliver. My original name was Mary, but Aunt Carol took me to have it changed. Aunt Carola has been kind to me, and I don't mind taking the blame for the sake of their mother-son relationship. On the day the college entrance exam results came out, the Oliver family decided to send Oliver abroad. Aunt Carola looked at me. Patricia, would you like to go abroad with Oliver? You did well on your exams, but studying abroad is also an option. The two of you going together would mean you could look out for each other. Looking out for each other since childhood, it's always been me taking care of Oliver. I detected Aunt Carola's selfish motives. Under Aunt Carola's expectant gaze, I said, all right. Oliver snorted with laughter and retreated to his room. While packing his luggage, he passed by me and said, Patricia, you're really shamelessly clinging to me. I denied it, saying I just wanted to go abroad to broaden my horizons too. 3. Oliver didn't he believe my explanation. The night before leaving the country, I heard Oliver say to Elizabeth on the phone, I don't blame you. I never blamed you. It wasn't your fault. Elizabeth, you can't choose what family you're born into. The sound of crying never stopped on the other end of the phone. Soon I watched him sneak over the wall and disappear into the night. Aunt Carola heard the noise and came out, asking did someone open the door. She was about to check Oliver's room when I emerged from around the corner and said, Auntie, it's me. I got up to drink some water. Early the next morning, Oliver still hadn't returned. I called him several times. No answer. Then his phone was turned off. It seemed the truth was about to come out. I could only resort to my clumsy acting skills and burst into tears on the spot. Through sobs, I poured out my fears about studying abroad. Aunt Carola's attention was completely captured by my performance. She comforted me, saying, it's all right, Patricia, Oliver will be with you. Haven T, you always liked him. This might be the perfect opportunity for the two of you to get together. So Aunt Carola had seen it all along. I nodded obediently, though my mind was still preoccupied with stalling for time. But just then I heard a mocking laugh. Oliver had returned unnoticed and stood there looking at me with disdain. For the first year abroad, Oliver and I were strangers living under the same roof. Whenever his new friends came over and asked who I was, Oliver would say the nanny. After moving abroad, Oliver became even more popular, but he turned everyone down. He waved his phone and said he had a girlfriend. Only then did I realize on the night before going abroad, he and Elizabeth had made their relationship official. Despite the 12-hour time difference, nothing could stop them from coming together. But long-distance relationships always bring their share of problems. Gradually, I began to hear arguments, but they always managed to reconcile. In the second year abroad, Oliver occasionally showed me some kindness. He couldn't get used to the food outside, so he'd come back to eat what I cooked. But that was as far as it went. Meanwhile, Elizabeth and Oliver's relationship was coming to an end. Elizabeth didn't trust Oliver, and Oliver thought Elizabeth was being unreasonable. On the day they broke up, Oliver drank heavily. After getting drunk, he insisted on pouring his heart out to me. I'm busy and don't want to listen. But the moment I turned and met that extraordinarily handsome face, my heart softened and I stayed. That decision to stay eventually led me to Oliver's bed. Don't worry, nothing happened. Oliver looked horrified and kept double-checking. After that day, he started avoiding me. One night when I got up to use the bathroom, I happened to catch him video calling Elizabeth to show off his abs. So they had made up. In the third year abroad, Oliver and Elizabeth broke up for good. He truly was quick to forget past pains. Once the wounds had healed this time, he got dead drunk again and dragged me into bed. His face was flushed, his body temperature alarmingly high. He pouted at me, coquettishly grabbing my hand to make me feel his abs. I couldn't resist. It's only human nature. That night was a complete mess. The morning sun shone upon his bruised purple and blue pectorals. This time, even the blind could tell something had happened. He stared at my face, silent for a long while. As I dressed, I said, I'll just consider it as being bitten by a dog. Patricia, I'll take responsibility for you. I stared at him in shock, facing that impossibly handsome face of his that looked perfect no matter when you saw it. I swallowed hard and said, actually, you don't have to do this. I got my share of pleasure too. His technique wasn't great, but the visual appeal was off the charts. At that very moment, his phone rang with a specially set ringtone. Seconds later, to my astonishment, he rejected Elizabeth's call right in front of me. Patricia, let us give it a try. The soft sunlight cast his face in a handsome and gentle glow, like the prince descending from the heavens I used to imagine when I was locked in the pig pen as a child. I heard my own voice say, okay. In the final year of studying abroad, Oliver and I gradually grew closer. In every way, he became addicted to the taste. I was thoroughly enjoying myself, just like any ordinary couple in love, until we returned home, until Elizabeth appeared at Oliver's company. After failing her college entrance exams that year, she attended a vocational college and later became a salesperson after graduation. For such an entry-level position, her resume shouldn't have normally crossed Oliver's desk. A few days later, Elizabeth secured the position, defeating more experienced competitors. I didn't ask a single question, but Oliver volunteered an explanation. She's going through a rough patch right now, so I'm giving her a hand. There won't be any further involvement. Life went on like this, with us occasionally returning to Oliver's home for meals together. At the dinner table, Aunt Carola brought up the engagement. Before I could speak, Oliver said, Patricia is at a crucial stage in her career. Right now, there's no need to rush into an engagement. I paused for a moment, then nodded with a smile. That's right. I thought to myself, it's time I visited Oliver's company. It didn't disappoint me in the end. Elizabeth entered Oliver's office carrying a lunchbox. She said, didn't you tell me on the phone that you've been craving this dish? Try it quickly. Oliver obliged by eating several bites. The scene looked quite heartwarming, so I pushed the door open and said, "Can I have a taste too?" Elizabeth turned pale, with fright on the spot. Oliver shielded her without changing his expression and said, "What brings you here?" I raised an eyebrow. With a smirk, "I came to see who my boyfriend was having lunch with." The moment I finished speaking, Elizabeth couldn't take it anymore. Muttering "I'm sorry," she grabbed her lunchbox and rushed out. Oliver's gaze turned icy as he looked at me. "Surely Elizabeth is timid. There was no need for this." With that, he strode out in long steps. When I arrived, I heard Elizabeth crying and saying, "Oliver, I can't have meals with you anymore. I don't want to be the other woman." Oliver replied without hesitation, "You're not the other woman. Patricia is the one who came later." Elizabeth retorted, "Since you're already together, that makes me the other woman." Before I could marvel at her self-awareness, Oliver interjected, "No, that's not it. I've always suspected that night was deliberately orchestrated by her. After all, she has had a crush on me for many years." Elizabeth finally stopped crying. That evening, Oliver told me he owed Elizabeth. Because she had delayed his college entrance exams, Elizabeth became so guilt-ridden that she developed depression and gave up on retaking the tests, so he had no choice but to indulge her. After that day, whenever Elizabeth saw me again, she always carried herself with haughty arrogance. She threw my lunchbox into the trash and placed her own in front of Oliver, saying, "President Oliver has particular tastes and only likes what I make." Oliver didn't deny it, as if it wasn't him who had eaten countless meals I prepared when we were abroad. Watching the scene, my mood improved greatly. I couldn't wait to hear the word break up from Oliver's mouth. Finally, when I came again, I heard ambiguous sounds coming from the office lounge. How careless they hadn't even locked the door. I pushed the door open to find Oliver half kneeling on the floor massaging Elizabeth's swollen ankle. His expression completely froze when he saw me, a flicker of panic flashing through his eyes. "What are you doing here?" I waved the 001 in my hand and said with a smile, "I was afraid you'd be too impatient and hadn't bought any." 6. When did the thought of breaking up with Oliver first occur to me? It was about 6 months into our relationship. I used to be responsible for cleaning the common areas, but after getting together with him, I also had to tidy his room. It felt like I'd been promoted from maid to chambermaid. Working during the day, working at night. After the honeymoon phase, hormones gradually stopped causing chaos. I realized he wasn't my prince. He was my master. For the first time, the thought of breaking up crossed my mind. Later one time, when Oliver was taking a shower, his phone rang. He asked me to check it for him. Then, I saw Oliver's pinned WeChat contact. Elizabeth the first didn't make a scene or throw a tantrum. She even thoughtfully charged his phone for him. Oliver stepped out of the bathroom. He was wrapped in a towel, his hair dripping wet. Both seductive and innocent, if only his expression weren't so flustered. He looked at me, his eyes slightly evasive. "You didn't check my phone, did you?" I smiled and said I didn't have time to look before the ringing stopped. Oliver seemed to let out a sigh of relief. Little did he know it was in that very moment. The thought of breaking up could no longer be stopped. Like a seed breaking through the soil. Like wildfire spreading. But my tuition of $1 million was paid by Aunt Carol. Not only that, she also gave me a substantial living allowance, even more than what Oliver received. She was visibly delighted when she found out Oliver and I were together, even giving me a big red envelope of money. I saved all that money without spending a single cent. The words "break up" remained stuck in my throat. This hesitation dragged on until it was time to return home. I spent a whole year with Oliver. After returning home, I submitted my resume to the most prestigious company in the industry. I was confident, but when Aunt Carol found out, she directly contacted her old classmate, a shareholder of this company. I only learned about this matter when colleagues gossiped about me being a nepotism hire after I joined the company. My feelings were complicated, but ultimately I was grateful. Last time I returned to Oliver's home, Aunt Carola grabbed my hand and said she was waiting for me to address her differently. The words "break up" stuck in my throat, neither rising nor falling. I couldn't spit them out, nor could I swallow them down, until Elizabeth's resume appeared before me. At that moment, Oliver stared at the thing in my hand, frozen for several seconds. Elizabeth shrank back like a startled rabbit, hiding half her body behind Oliver's tall frame. "Patricia, what are you making a fuss about? Haven't I already explained everything to you?" As he spoke these words, his hand still rested on Elizabeth's ankle. Elizabeth grabbed Oliver's shoulder and said, "Yes, Patricia, don't let your dirty mind see filth everywhere. I sprained my ankle, and CEO Oliver brought me here to rest." My gaze traced the lipstick stain on Oliver's shirt collar. I shrugged and tossed the small box onto the bed, where Elizabeth was sitting. Elizabeth reacted as if I were about to throw acid at her, startling violently with a shriek and nearly tumbling off the bed. As I turned to leave, a noise came from behind me. Oliver came running after me. "You frightened Elizabeth. You must apologize to her." In his haste, he'd forgotten to conceal the intimate form of a dress in front of me. He reached out to grab my wrist. I slapped his hand away. Smack! The sound was sharp and clear. Oliver's hand immediately bore a red mark. I glanced at him and said, "Don't touch me, you're filthy." Oliver's hand froze midair. 7. The air grew still for a moment. "A perfect opportunity." Seizing the moment, I said, "Since we've come this far, why don't we just break up?" Patricia. Oliver stared at me in disbelief. His gaze swept over my face again and again, as if trying to find some flaw. His expression darkened, and his voice seemed to be forced out through clenched teeth. "It was you who climbed into my bed back then. So that's really what he thought." But that drug was never strong enough to make him lose his senses and turn into a beast. He was angry that Elizabeth had broken up with him and used the alcohol as an excuse to indulge himself. At that very moment, a thud sounded behind him. Elizabeth, who had been chasing after him, fell to the ground, her eyes reddening as tears welled up in them. Oliver turned and walked away without hesitation. His final words were flung over his shoulder, "You don't get to break up with me." After that day, Oliver and I began a cold war. Mostly, it was him being cold. I was busy with work and didn't have much time for him to begin with. They say unrequited love is one person's battlefield chaos. As for mine, the banners had long been rolled up, already buried beneath the dust. My secret crush ended in the summer of senior year. Everything after that was just a fleeting revival. 3 days later, Oliver moved back from the hotel to the house we shared. When he returned, my supervisor was confirming my job transfer details with me. Before I could speak, Oliver said we were both at fault for what happened before. Let us meet halfway. I've already dismissed Elizabeth. Let us put this matter to rest. My mind flashed to the photos our mutual friend had sent me, Oliver showing Elizabeth around a house. I hung up the phone and said with a smile, "All right." Oliver breathed a sigh of relief. As he passed by the sofa, he seemed to notice something and asked me with some confusion, "Wasn't there a painting here before? I remember you bought it from a street artist, and you really liked it." I casually replied, "Yeah, threw it away." Oliver paused mid-step. Oliver and I coexisted peacefully for quite some time. He came home late from overtime work several times, or went out in the middle of the night. He said it was about company matters. I didn't ask further. Gradually, Elizabeth couldn't hold back anymore. When Oliver and I were having meals, his phone would often ring. There was even a time when on our way to Oliver's place for dinner. While waiting at the red light, he glanced at his phone. After a while, he told me there was an emergency at the company and asked me to get out of the car. I left without hesitation. Oliver tried to explain something, but I had already stepped out. "Patricia, wait for me. I'll come back as soon as I'm done." He seemed to be assuring me of something. Suppressing my annoyance, I responded with a fine. Oliver's villa was somewhat remote. By the time I arrived by taxi, Aunt Carol had already been waiting for half an hour. Seeing that I was alone, she seemed displeased. What could be more important than eating? With that, she went to grab her phone to make a call. During this period, my lack of attention had made Oliver too relaxed. He seemed to have forgotten how recently he had taken over the company. Aunt Carola was still the true power behind it. A few minutes later, Aunt Carol returned. Her face looked grim. It seemed she had already inquired Oliver wasn't at the company. Oliver's father had left with nothing after his affair back then. Aunt Carola had been through it all before she knew exactly what a man's overtime excuses meant. An hour later, Oliver arrived fashionably late. His clothes were freshly pressed, his hair carrying the scent of shampoo. Aunt Carola summoned Oliver into the study. Oliver instinctively accused me, "Did you go tattling to Mom again?" The study door wasn't properly closed. I faintly overheard their conversation. Aunt Carola said, "If Patricia finds out how you've treated her, she'll never forgive you." Oliver's tone was resolute. "Patricia, won't find out. I'm always careful every time. I just want to help Elizabeth." Aunt Carola said, "Say that again." Oliver paused, then said, "I'm always careful every time." Aunt Carola laughed twice, her laughter dripping with sarcasm. Oliver was puzzled, but kept insisting, "Mom, as long as you don't say anything, Patricia won't find out. Trust me, this is the last time." Aunt Carola cut him off. "How could I have such a foolish son? Do you really think Patricia doesn't know?" Oliver's voice came to an abrupt halt. 9 on the way back, the car was quiet. I was looking at apartment photos sent by the agent. Oliver tried to make small talk several times, but I brushed him off with vague responses. He caught a glimpse of my phone screen, and his grip on the steering wheel suddenly tightened. His Adam's apple bobbed as he asked me why I was looking at houses. There was a barely detectable hint of tension in his voice. At that moment, the familiar ringtone sounded again. Oliver paid no attention to it, yet the ringing seemed relentless, continuing for a long time until it finally stopped by itself. And then it started ringing again. Oliver impatiently hung up several times. But the person on the other end seemed determined to get through with this call. Oliver's forehead was beaded with sweat. He said, "There are really so many spam calls these days." After getting home, I went to take a shower. Midway through my shower, the bathroom door was pulled open. Oliver hugged me from behind. That handsome face drew close to me, his breath as sweet as orchids. "Patricia, it's been so long since we..." I broke free from his embrace, politely declining his invitation. "There's an important company meeting tomorrow." I've long since become immune to this face. Oliver is like fancy food. Pleasant to look at, unpleasant to eat, and not suitable for daily consumption either. Seeing Oliver wouldn't settle down, I said, "Why don't you go return that call? She might have something urgent." Oliver frowned, his expression stiffening for a moment. "It's just a spam call. Why should I answer it?" "Patricia, don't you trust me?" I sighed and said, "Did you forget? You set a special ringtone for Elizabeth. 10 when I came out after showering." Oliver was sitting on the edge of the bed smoking. Cigarette butts littered the ground. He had learned to smoke when he first broke up with Elizabeth. After that, he would smoke every time they fought or separated. But it had been a long time since he last smoked. He glanced at me and said, "So you've known all along?" I nodded in acknowledgement. Oliver stared at me intently, his eyes filled with confusion. "Then why didn't you argue with me?" I glanced at the time and said, "I have a meeting early tomorrow morning. The smell of smoke is too strong. I'll sleep in the guest room tonight." Oliver watched in silence as I pushed the door open and left. Early the next morning I opened my eyes to see someone standing by my bedside. He stared at me with a face that hadn't he slept all night, his eyes dark and intense. Can we talk? Before I was fully awake, I heard him continue speaking. Patricia, I don't want to lie to you. I thought Elizabeth and I were over, but the moment I saw her I had to admit she was different. Don't worry though, I already made things clear with her last night. As he spoke, Oliver handed me his phone. He had deleted the contact name Elizabeth and removed her from his pinned chats. On the screen the last words he said to Elizabeth were, "It ends here, don't contact me again. You see, it's over between me and Elizabeth. From now on it's just the two of us." But at that very moment a photo came through from the other side. A bathtub selfie, don't get the wrong idea. Not a sexy photo, but a photo of slit wrists. Oliver's expression instantly changed. His first reaction was to turn and walk away. But after taking 2 steps he turned to look at me again, his lips parting slightly. Seeing his troubled expression, I considerately said, "Go ahead, a life is at stake." Oliver didn't seem relieved by this. He seemed to finally understand. I didn't care. Before leaving he looked at me several times with reluctance in his eyes and said, "Patricia, wait for me to come back tonight, and we'll talk properly then." I didn't take it to heart. I wasn't lying to Oliver. "This meeting is truly important, it concerns my promotion and transfer." The meeting concluded, and everything was settled. I called Auntie Carola. She asked about Oliver and me, how we've been lately. After getting the answer, she didn't try to mediate, just apologized on behalf of Oliver and me. I said, "Auntie, I've transferred all the money you've spent on me over the years to your account. It doesn't mean I want to sever ties completely. I just hope to repay you. I may not be able to visit you as often in the future." Aunt Carol asked me what I meant. I said it all in one breath. "Starting next month I'll be assigned to work abroad. With my study abroad background, I'm very suitable for this position. I really appreciate you recommending me to this company in the first place. Actually, from the very beginning I had planned to stay and work overseas. But Oliver had to return home to take over his family's business. I had no choice but to go back with him. Ever since Elizabeth appeared, I finally had the chance to apply for a transfer. I've already picked out my new house and some important belongings have been shipped abroad. Like that painting in the living room, for instance." Aunt Carola said, "I'm proud of you." I smiled sincerely. Oliver knew this was Elizabeth's scheme of self-inflicted injury. But Elizabeth was so fragile, so adorably naive, like a porcelain doll. So Oliver still went. Elizabeth was both his first love and his white moonlight. Before Elizabeth appeared, the only girl whose name he could remember was Patricia, because Patricia always smiled at him with fawning flattery. His homework was done by Patricia, and she covered for him when he skipped class. So he remembered Patricia. But Elizabeth was different. She came from a poor background, just like Patricia. Yet while Patricia was like a wild weed, Elizabeth was like a flower, pure and lovely. Long-distance relationships are just too difficult. Elizabeth deliberately went on blind dates with other men to provoke him. In a fit of anger, Oliver got together with Patricia. They missed their chance with each other. Youthful pride always makes people lose many things. Falling in love again after reuniting seemed almost expected. Oliver reveled in each thrilling heartbeat. He thought Patricia would forgive him. After all, Patricia had always loved him. Back then, to be with him, Patricia followed him abroad and stayed by his side all along. She got what she wished, for she had stolen Elizabeth's marriage, owed Elizabeth, and should turn a blind eye. Oliver told himself this. He carried Elizabeth to the hospital. He stayed with Elizabeth like that until evening. He had intended to leave, but Elizabeth grabbed his sleeve. Through tears she asked, "Can we ever go back to how things were?" Oliver couldn't bring himself to let go of her hand. He sent Patricia a message. "Patricia, Elizabeth is emotionally unstable. I'll be back later." He had promised to return, but Oliver broke his word again. He waited for Patricia to argue with him. He would show her Elizabeth's medical records, have the caregiver testify for him. Nothing had happened between them. Patricia was in the wrong, but Oliver would forgive her. By then, it would be the perfect time to let bygones be bygones. They would reconcile. That was Oliver's plan. But he didn't know that by then the place would already be deserted. Early the next morning, while Elizabeth was still asleep, Oliver bought a bouquet of flowers and made time to return home. 13 after settling in, I quickly adapted to the new environment. The world is vast, all filled with the scent of freedom. I no longer had to shoulder the responsibility of taking care of Oliver. Strolling down the street, someone called out to me, stumbling over the pronunciation, but still managing to say my name correctly. "Miss Patricia, after all these years." I remembered it was that street artist. In a foreign land we meet again, after long years apart. Not quite friends, yet bound by some fateful connection. We share drinks together, then bid farewell with courtesy. Next time we meet, perhaps many more years will have passed. Life is but a continuous cycle of meetings and partings, just like my encounters with Aunt Carola and with Oliver. A few days later, a mutual friend told me Oliver had been searching for me relentlessly. He went to my company. My boss only told him which country I went to. Mutual friends say such a devoted and loyal good man is hard to come by. Just some boundary issues. Men are inherently free, women shouldn't cling too tightly. I casually blocked him too. I had received messages from Oliver. I said we had already broken up. He said he didn't agree. The conversation was too childish, so I didn't reply to him anymore. Oliver searched for me for 3 or 4 months. Then he got together with Elizabeth. He publicly announced their relationship on social media with great fanfare, posting multiple 9-square grid photo collages. No one came to persuade me to reconcile with Oliver anymore. I enjoyed the peace and quiet. Oliver's social circle had also gone silent at some point, and he'd even set his profile to 3 days visible. A year later, I returned to China. When Aunt Carola heard about it, she said she would come to pick me up. At the airport, I saw Oliver standing beside her. 14, I wasn't angry about it. Aunt Carola was the closest elder to me, closer than my own parents. It was impossible for me to cut ties with Oliver. It had been a year since we last met. Oliver had grown much thinner, though he remained as handsome as ever. Otherwise, I wouldn't have had a crush on him. But my infatuation was shallow and required no reciprocation. Like admiring a beautiful potted flower, I wouldn't want to claim the flower as my own. If the flower were willing to let me possess it briefly, I would gladly accept. But when I stride forward carrying a potted flower becomes somewhat heavy. Oliver stared at me quietly, his eyes faintly reddening. I calmly called out to him, brother. He froze for a long moment. This form of address, I hadn't used it for him in ages. Back when we were still in school. But later, after we'd fallen out and then started dating, calling him brother just didn't feel right anymore. Now times have changed. This title couldn't be more fitting. Aunt Carola explained a few words to me. Oliver insisted on coming along, and she couldn't refuse him. I waved my hand to indicate it was fine. I shared every little detail about working abroad with Auntie Carola. Oliver listened with rapt attention. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw him secretly curl his lips into a smile, his gaze repeatedly drifting toward me. But when I mentioned my new boyfriend, Oliver's smile suddenly froze. As for Aunt Carol, she kept asking me about what kind of person he was, where he worked, and when I'd bring him home to meet everyone. I said I don't have any plans to get married for now. Hearing this, Oliver seemed to relax. But then, I added, though I'd like to have a child first. Oliver blurted out, nonsense. Aunt Carola said, I actually think this decision is quite good. Men can sometimes just be a burden. By the way, I think girls are nice, don't you agree? I nodded yes, that's exactly what I think too. No one paid any attention to Oliver. 15 Oliver came to see me many times afterward, but was always turned away. He stood outside the door and said, Patricia, you can't do this to me. Through the door I said to him, we both have partners, and this inappropriate of you. Yet Oliver seemed to have discovered a glimmer of hope. He eagerly explained, Elizabeth and I aren't together, I only did that to upset you. I stopped paying him any attention. After some time, Oliver finally realized the only time I did give him a kind look was in front of Aunt Carol. He began appearing frequently at Oliver's house, even inviting me out under the guise of Aunt Carola. My birthday arrived. Except for the years abroad, I had celebrated every birthday at Oliver's house. My birth parents later had another daughter. Not because they missed me, but because they needed to save up for their son's bride price. That sister I had never met before had gone through great lengths to find me. I gave her money, without saying much, because I knew she was a determined one. She later sent me a few messages. I'm safe and sound, saying I found a sales job, worked my way up to store manager, and later opened my own shop. Everything is fine. Aunt Carola lit candles for me. I closed my eyes and made a wish, wishing for me, Aunt Carola, and my little sister to all be well. After dinner, when we were sitting on the sofa, my boyfriend called me on video. Happy birthday. Actually, he had already sent me his wishes right at midnight last night. I introduced him to Aunt Carolina and Oliver. After exchanging a few words, Aunt Carolina went to cut some fruit. I continued the video call with my boyfriend. Oliver just stood there watching. Half an hour later, when I ended the call, he remained in the exact same position, unmoved. He suddenly spoke, his voice slightly hoarse. You two seem very close. I smiled and said, yes, we are. Oliver's gaze made me uncomfortable. I stood up to leave when he suddenly spoke again. I'll wait for you to break up. 16 Oliver, of course, never got to wait in the end. After my breakup, I moved on to the next relationship. Later I broke up again, stopped dating altogether, but still didn't give him the time of day. He remained single. At least that's how it appeared to the outside world. Gradually many people began to side with him. Even my closest friend tentatively asked for my opinion once. Until Elizabeth showed up at Aunt Carol's with a swollen belly. Oliver looked at me in panic, claiming Elizabeth had drugged him. Elizabeth sneered, what I gave you was the same thing you drank that night you rolled into bed with Patricia. Just some mildly aphrodisiac wine. Oliver's face turned deathly pale. Back then, after breaking up with Elizabeth in a fit of anger, he slept with me. Now that he has broken up with me in another fit of anger, he slept with Elizabeth again. Unexpected, yet perfectly understandable. Oliver glared at Elizabeth and growled, what nonsense are you talking about? This child can't possibly be mine. Elizabeth remained calm, suggesting they could take a paternity test. Oliver looked at me urgently, as if waiting to see my reaction. Oliver wanted to say something more, but Aunt Carola slapped him across the face. Elizabeth looked at him, malice flashing in her eyes, and said, Oliver, Patricia never thought you were good enough. Guess who delivered my resume to you all those years ago? Oliver suddenly widened his eyes and looked at me. From beginning to end, my expression remained unchanged. Oliver swayed slightly as if struggling to stay upright. I could never be a child bride. At best, I'd be a little nanny. Patricia, why would you do this? So, what if I did it? Even before this resume, their online connection had never been severed. I merely added fuel to the fire. Later, I went abroad again. I never saw Oliver again. A year later, with my career stabilized, I had a daughter. Aunt Carola came to visit and had my daughter call her grandma. She said it carefully, afraid I might be upset. She had already revoked Oliver's management rights over the company and hired professional managers. She no longer wanted to see Oliver. I simply invited her to settle abroad with me. After years of familial companionship, I called her mom. In the end, I changed my mind, but not because of a man. Yet this change of heart involved far fewer complications than if it had been for a man. The end.